Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell, a podcast in which I, Mark Decano, discuss the inherently broad term comedy in all its wide-ranging and wondrous machinations, and then somehow expect my guest to distill it down to its tiniest essence, like some sort of deranged and fatuous alchemist. I make no apology for the number of other people's quotes in this episode, because how can I possibly describe my guest better than ukulele sex pest and human muppet? Except to say that she has absolutely smashed fringe festivals from Edinburgh to Adelaide, and online fringe magazine Gutter Culture called her latest show Daddy a feminist masterpiece. It's comedy cabaret phenomenon, Jamie Mykaela.
Hello.
Hello, hi.
Hey, how you going?
I'm good. How have you been? You all right?
Yeah, doing all right. It's my day off from work, so I'm very, very relaxed today.
So, where does the young Jamie Mykaela get started on the road to cabaret and comedy in her life?
Oh, okay. So that's a really good question.
Thank you.
So I started out as an old school theatre kid, like quite old school theatre kid, typical theatre nerd, no friends during high school, spent my time watching like old Hollywood musicals and stuff like that. And then eventually I went on to study musical theatre, and I got a certificate in musical theatre. Mm-hmm. And then when I was in about year 11, I started getting a little bit more rebellious, and I started skipping school, and I would skip school to go work in a record store. Because there was a bunch of like people in their mid-20s who were running the store that just wanted to smoke weed in the alleyway upstairs, and there turned out to be this 15-year-old that just wanted to sit at the till and listen to local music all day. And so they were like, "Oh, we're not going to pay you, but you can, as long as like nobody steals shit, you're all good to go." And I started sneaking into gigs and stuff like that, and I was snuck into this one gig that absolutely blew my mind. I was writing a lot of folk music and stuff like that, and I was performing in venues that I shouldn't have been performing in because of the liquor licensing laws. But you know, that's their problem. It's not on me. And I went to this show, and something changed in my brain. When I was at this show, I saw this guy who was like standing on top of a bar table, very precariously balanced, wailing a cover of David Bowie's "Oh You Pretty Things" over this kind of like imagine if like Chicks on Speed did an arrangement of "Oh You Pretty Things." It was like that, just pure like electro clash, like electro punk craziness. And it was like standing room only. And I was standing up against this pillar watching this guy like wail, like crooning style wail. And I was like, what is this? And it completely like something broke in my brain, like I short circuited. And I'm like, oh, this is what I want to do. This, whatever this guy is doing, I want to do that. This puts a spanner in the bloody works. And I found out that this was a fundraising show for this fella to go to Edinburgh Fringe. And I was like, well, what's he doing in Scotland? And that's how I got introduced to cabaret stuff in the kind of context that I do. I knew of it through kind of like your Amanda Palmers and things like that, and the Dresden Dolls, who like I was obsessed with when I was going through kind of like this very weird goth phase, where I did makeup like Susie Sue every day, but I just ended up looking like a clapped Robert Smith. It was a state. It was bad. It was bad. I was just like, I'm part of the Bromley contingent. I was not. I was a kid in regional Western Australia. And yeah, so I did more digging, and I became like basically obsessed with this guy and his music and like what he was doing in his performances. And I was like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And like he was roaming around this audience. People were terrified of him, but you couldn't tear your eyes away, right? Like it was genuinely like, for my little 15-year-old brain, that shit was intoxicating. I'm like, what is this like level of power that you've got? This is fantastic. I want whatever that is. And so then I ended up discovering like a bunch of the like London cabaret crew through him. And I discovered people like Tricity Vogue, who does Tricity Vogue's ukulele cabaret every month in London, who like I've now gotten to do that gig, which is amazing. People like Laurie Black, who I've gone on tour with when she was touring in Australia, and I've done shows with over here now. I discovered people like Marcel Lugon. I discovered people like Frisky and Manish, like all of these kind of, like Joe Black, who's now like a drag race like phenomenon. And I just immersed myself entirely, and I'm like, oh, this is a perfect combination of what I want to do. I want to do this. I want to be one of these guys. And it was a weird time. And then I ended up applying to do this thing called 600 Seconds, which is run by the Blue Room Theatre in Perth, Western Australia. And I was in year 12, and I was one of their youngest applicants. And I was like, I want to do, it's a selection of performances that are 10 minutes long. And I was like, I want to do a 10-minute murder mystery comedy cabaret. And they were like, sorry, what? And I'm like, did I stutter? I want to do that. And they're like, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to give you a bunch of actors from the acting school. Go nuts, go crazy. You're the director. And I was like, oh, okay. And they assign you mentors. And I was assigned, funnily enough, I was assigned the fella who I saw at this gig that I short-circuited. His name's Tomás Ford. He is my best friend in the whole wide world, and was the maid of honor at my wedding, which was very confusing for a lot of people there. But never mind that. It totally makes sense. And yeah, he's ended up being like, he started out as my mentor for a fair few years, and we ended up we filmed a mini-series, his mini-series, Tomás Ford Chase, in Singapore together. We went on tour. We did Edinburgh together, which was 5 years ago now. I'm being reminded by Facebook. And yeah, we just became like the closest of friends. And yeah, he's now a collaborator and just like artistic soulmate of mine. Absolutely. Yeah. And so I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for him, if I hadn't have snuck into that gig. So I'd like to thank the lax licensing laws and the terrible security at Pika Bar in Perth for that. Thank you. It's amazing what you can do when you're confident with a lick of red lipstick.
Wow, that's quite the origin story.
Yeah, that's it. Like it's peak Jamie Mykaela.
So obviously Tomás Ford's got a lot of attention there. He once described you as Perth's ukulele cabaret queen.
Yeah, he did. This was like at the very, very, very start. This was after I covered one of his songs. I was still kind of like trying to figure out what cabaret was exactly, and I ended up covering like a handful of his songs because like imitation is the most sincerest form of flattery, and I just desperately wanted to be a 30-year-old electronic cabaret artist when I was a 16-year-old girl with a ukulele. And he shared one of my covers and called me Perth's ukulele cabaret queen. And that broke my brain. I was so gassed because that was like my first ever like quote that I had gotten, aside from like someone at a venue calling me to camp to perform at the Rosemount, which God, that worked out well for me, didn't it?
Well, I mean, quotes about you, if you'll forgive me, I've seen some interesting things. The phrase comedy cabaret firecracker comes up quite a lot.
Yeah, firecracker is what a lot of press use when they don't know how to describe a brash young woman with a lot of energy. And quirky. They love using the Q word.
Yeah. I've got a great one here, which I think is from your 2018 show Napoleon Complex. And the quote is, a firecracker with an overinflated ego and a hard-earned imposter syndrome colliding in a hot mess of costume changes, ukulele strings, songs, stories, and ping pong.
Yes.
There's quite a lot going on there.
Yeah, that show was chaos. Napoleon Complex. That was my second show. And yeah, I used to do a comedy burlesque routine. There's a song that's like quite iconic in Australia called Just a Song About Ping Pong by a band called Operator Please. It was released in like around about like 2008 or something like that. And this is really, really fast paced, very kind of like punky track that's about 2 minutes long. And the refrain is, it's just a song, it's just a song, it's just a song about ping pong. And then it goes kind of nuts on the guitars and drums and stuff like that. And I had a comedy burlesque routine with the intro of it was done by Josh Glantz. And it was him in like his best like transatlantic accent, being like, and here we have the world's like top table tennis champion, Jamie Mykaela. And what I would do is I would give the audience, I had 700 ping pong balls in like little dustbins, and I would give them to the audience. And I would come on stage in like this little kind of like ridiculous athletic outfit, and I would start doing stretches. And when it kicked in, people would throw ping pong balls at me. And I would try and hit them. And I'm completely unquote. I am not an athletic person whatsoever. So I would try and hit them, but also be manically trying to take my clothes off. And I put it together because I wanted to create the most unsexy burlesque routine you had ever seen in my life. And like... and I would like run into the crowd because I didn't have like a burlesque costume that was like easy release, kind of like designed to be taken off. I had like a Bond sports bra that was 2 sizes too small. And so I would have to run into the crowd and ask someone to help me take it off. And like, I would never have like tassely pasties. I would have like just like electrical tape across my nipples, which I would have to take off at the end, to much pain. And so that was the way that I finished Napoleon Complex when I was in Adelaide doing Adelaide Fringe. And so after the show, it would be me, tits out, like in these little booty shorts, just trying to pick up ping pong balls in the 15-minute changeover while audience members are like trying to come up to me being like, that was such a great show. And I'm like just on the ground, like topless, just trying to like look after ping pong balls, trying to get them into a suitcase so I can piss off and go to my next spot. It was sheer chaos, that show. It was nightmarish. And it was like this ping pong routine was after like this like good 10 minutes of the show that was like a very deep and emotional like kind of like chat about being a young woman in the arts and talking about feminism and harassment and stuff like that. And then I'm like, I'm gonna get my tits out and you're gonna throw things at me, like welcome to Fringe, baby.
Wow, my God, what a story. That's got to be a million miles from what you expected when you took your ukulele to the Fringe show. So, oh, this is my first time, but I reckon in a few years I'll probably be scrabbling around on the floor half naked for ping pong balls.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. Like constantly, like just refusing to get a pair of like safety knickers that fit me. So I'd end up accidentally just like flashing my cooch to like an entire audience just with a ping pong paddle in front, just being like, oh boy. I need everyone to leave. We don't have the liquor licensing for coochie. Come on, get out. I need to clean up ping pong balls. Get out.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm quirky. I'm a firecracker. It's fine.
I'm fine. This is a little cabaret, but also like get out. I'm legally in trouble.
Okay. Okay, right. Let's rewind a little bit back here. So,
I'm so sorry.
So, what seems like about an hour and a half ago, you were talking about musical theatre.
Yeah.
So, why not the full training in classic mainstream musical theatre? Why the cabaret detour?
I got really bored of doing other people's stuff. It was boring. I was doing like a lot of theatre stuff, and like I was doing plays and musicals and things like that. And like I love it, but like the thing is it's short-lived for like 5 nights when you're doing it kind of like back then, like at a lower level. Like it's really short-lived, and I hated that. Because like the thing is it would be like this kind of like, oh my God, we're going to stay friends forever kind of thing. And then they never fucking talk to you again.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was just a little bit boring and restricting for me. And I was really lucky when I was in year 11, I moved to a new school, and I I got cast as Velma von Tussle in a production of Hairspray. And I was really confused because I was in year 11, and like main roles were meant to go to automatically like year 12s, and one of the year 12s had auditioned for Velma von Tussle. She was automatically meant to get it. Luckily, she was someone that I absolutely fucking hated, so I was super stoked. But I asked my drama teacher, who was also my English and media teacher, because I did filmmaking. And he knew like the level of kind of like nonsense. There was an understanding there of each other that I was a pain in the ass, and I would turn every essay into a whinge about like how it doesn't pass the Bechdel test and things like that. There was an understanding there, and we were very honest with each other. And I was just like, sir, like why did I get cast as Velma, who was meant to be like this like very tall kind of Debbie Harry kind of character? And he's like, well, honestly, Jamie, it's because you're a little bit of a bitch. And I was like, listen, that's fair. I'll take it. All right, cool. And that was really great. And I basically was given free rein on this character who like in the musical is like horrific. She is just the worst human, super racist, like the misogyny is off the charts, the delightful fat shaming and things like that. And I was basically given free rein with this character, and I was like, shit, I want more of this. Like I like whatever this is, like I want more of it. Like being given that free rein was like a blessing and a curse, because the blessing was like I was like, oh yeah, this is right up my street. The curse was musicals don't usually provide that. And it's meant to be done a certain way unless you're working with like a hippy dippy director who wants to do a new agey version of something where it's got a completely different meaning and stuff like that, which is few and far between. So I really enjoyed doing musicals, but like they're not for me anymore. Like I love going to them, don't get me wrong, and I really admire like the work, like front of house, back of house that goes into it, and how it is like this well-oiled machine.
Right.
Like I really, really admire that. Like my heart flutters at a good like ensemble tap solo. My mind just like I'm 8 years old again watching What a Way to Go. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. Same thing with like magic as well. I'm just like, this is the coolest. But yeah, it's just not for me to do anymore.
Right.
Like, and so cabaret kind of gives me the freedom to kind of do what I feel, and if I do want or choose to get direction, I can.
Yeah.
But like if I don't want to, I don't have to, and that's the perks of being like a self-produced and self-directed artist.
Right.
Is that like I can reach out if I need that kind of like guidance.
Right.
Yeah.
What appeals to you more? Is it being a solo act on stage, or is it the collaboration that you talked about there?
I would say just like being a solo act and having that kind of like representation of myself, and like being like this, look upon my works, ye mighty and despair kind of thing. Like all of this, all of what you see, that is me. I have done everything. Yeah. Like with a show, like for example, Daddy, two of my beautiful, beautiful best friends, Chloe Stewart, who is an amazing writer from Perth, and Tomás Ford, who I talked about earlier. They helped me kind of polish this script and helped kind of like punch it up and things like that, which was unbelievably helpful.
Yeah.
But having that kind of like representation of self on stage, of a kind of like, I'm the only person on stage, like I am the one to be listened to in this particular circumstance, which like is something that I don't really get kind of like in my like day-to-day life. Like I work in customer facing in kind of like on the outskirts of healthcare. I'm a very kind of like small, super femme presenting kind of like nice young lady who butter wouldn't melt in my mouth kind of thing. And there is a lack of kind of like assertiveness that like I would like to have, but I only have when I'm doing my art kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of philosophical like mumbo jumbo, but like, yeah, it's just kind of like being a solo artist means that I get kind of like, I get listened to. Yeah. Which is really nice. And it's something that like, I don't get.
Well, something that you alluded to there, which I like to ask my guest about, is the stage persona. How much of that is you, or is it entirely a character that you're playing on the stage?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think with definitely with Daddy, it's an idealized version of me turned up to 11. Like, yeah. So when I go out to gigs and I'm like meeting people and stuff like that, like if I'm just like a punter or I'm doing photography for artists and stuff like that, there is like a very kind of like toned down version of Jamie Mykaela. But yeah, the full one is definitely kind of like on stage. Like some of the stuff that I say in that show, like you couldn't pay me enough to say like in casual conversation in real life. I feel like that particular Jamie has kind of like this. There's a certain kind of like permission that comes with like the charm and magnetism of that character and the confidence of that character that like she can get away with murder. Like some truly outlandish shit comes out of that lady's mouth. And like I watch videos back and I'm like, oh my God, I'm sorry for what I said when I was on stage. Like a lack of filter and a lack of just like care, because like at least with that show, like with the entire point of that show, it's kind of like, what is somebody going to do? Disagree? Optics aren't great on that. Like
oh, completely. I want to talk to you about Daddy, which is the show that I saw at Oxford recently. And this is quite a quote-heavy episode because there's a lot of these quotes about you are fantastic. And I hope you'll forgive me.
I've been absolutely blessed with quotes. I think like I've been truly spoiled that when a poorly written review comes in, I'm just like, what? Huh?
Well, there you go. Let's talk first before we get onto these fantastic quotes and your show, Daddy. Let's ask you about reviews. I mean, how do you respond to criticism?
With a show like Daddy, and oh my God, this feels like I'm sucking myself off here. I'm so sorry. I haven't received a review for any of my shows that's been under 4 stars ever. Yeah. I have so many Google alerts on my name and every variation of my name just at the off chance that I've missed one. I've not yet missed one. The one piece of criticism I've gotten for a show like Daddy, specifically for Daddy, was a remark that I make about a song that John Lennon wrote. And this particular piece of criticism was, I think Jamie missed the mark here. This song is the song of an emancipator, not a slaver. And I was like, okay, sure. But also keeping in mind the particular slurs that are being used, and this particular reviewer is white, is a white guy from Perth, and I'm like, I really don't think that you have the credentials to say whether this song is a song of an emancipator. And like that was the one piece of criticism I've gotten for this show, which is nuts.
Yeah.
It's nuts. Like I've had like especially like slightly older art dads like come up to me and be like, yeah, oh, like it definitely was a different time. And I'm like, oh, but babes, I addressed that. Like
Yeah.
we talked about that. That's what I mean when I say I've been spoiled. I have no doubt that like when I was doing it in Perth and stuff like that, and a handful of comedians came to it, I have no doubt that they would have their criticisms, especially with me billing myself as comedy whilst being a kind of cabaret storytelling act.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I haven't received a lot of criticism on this show, and I am very, very blessed because I'm a very sensitive young lady. When she's not on stage, she's like very, very fragile and very gentle. Surprisingly.
But that even more begs the question: why write such a challenging show, one that challenges perspective so much, and obviously opening yourself up to the criticism you've just mentioned?
I think because this show started off like its first season, which was at the now defunct Lazy Susan's Comedy Den at the Brisbane Hotel in Perth.
Mm-hmm.
It started off as a very kind of like the performance of it was very kind of like emotionally volatile. It was very raw because I was still processing what kind of the particular event that inspired this show, which I talk about in kind of like that spoken word segment, where it's kind of like the reveal is, oh, the show is actually about her, blah. That kind of thing. And I think because it was so very visually, like the audience could definitely feel that it was like a very raw and emotional show. I feel like that kind of like set the tone of like, and unfortunately it set the tone of kind of like, oh, I don't think we should criticize this show. And I didn't write it for people to think that. I did write it to challenge people because like in my experience of being like a young woman in the arts and observing and unfortunately playing a small role in the abuse of those power dynamics in the arts, like this was a show that I needed to write because I needed to process something that kind of fucked me up. And very much left me like disillusioned with the kind of like very, very militant kind of like kill your heroes kind of thing. Right. That, yeah, I couldn't shake. But now kind of like with the more separation that comes from that, like I definitely want to invite kind of conversation about my show and invite criticism, because it's kind of like I address some kind of like I preempt some criticism like within the show, like especially with people being like it was a different time, you can't hold like things that happened like decades ago to modern standards and things like that. And like, and especially like because there was a lot of chatter surrounding the show about kind of like canceling people and things like that. And it very much like now I very much don't want the show to be that. I want it to be kind of like recognition of kind of like that our heroes can be flawed individuals. Like the thing is like my straight up Lord and Savior as a snaggletooth bisexual young lady is David Bowie. Like, and oh boy, he's a treasure trove for it. Like that, like, yeah, him having like a soft kind of like Nazi phase when he was in Berlin, like that's wild. And like if like an act as big as David Bowie, like imagine if like someone like Harry Styles went to Berlin, did a bunch of coke, and then was kind of like, oh, maybe they had like a point. Like that would not fly.
I'm not sure that hasn't
And,
happened, but yeah.
yeah. Like if it has, he's kept it very quiet. His PR team are working around the clock. Harry Styles to be cancelled next year, owning Nazi memorabilia or something like that. Like, it's going to be great. It's going to be delicious. Watch Twitter like just go up in flames.
Oh yeah,
it's going to be. Oh, that's going to be a treat. Can't wait to write a show about that.
Well, I mean, we're talking about your show, which obviously you're familiar with and I've seen, but for the benefit of listeners who unfortunately have not yet, what is the overarching premise of the story?
So Daddy is a show about the long-lasting Lolita complex that pop and rock music has had for the last 50 years. It's to put it in very kind of blunt terms, it's a jukebox cabaret of nonsense songs written by rock stars that we love. And how there was this kind of fascination with very often underage girls, and how those songs are still massive hits to this day.
So I'm going to go back to those quotes I alluded to earlier. With regard to this show, this is from the performance that I saw in July at the Oxford Fringe.
Yep.
This is a great article written by George Fogarty, and he says,
wasn't it? So such a well-written review.
Yeah, Jamie Mykaela, there's no separation between discomfort and the hilarity. I really think that's a wonderful line, because I think that sums it up for me, because the sounds of the gasps and intakes of breath, followed by the nervous laughter rippling around the room, was quite the contrast. Is that what you anticipated?
Absolutely, that's exactly what I wanted. Going back to kind of like when I was younger and I snuck in to see Tomás perform, the hilarity came from the discomfort. Like I really, really relish in that, like putting people in like a low stakes situation where they're slightly uncomfortable, or they're greeted with something that they're kind of like, oh, I don't know about this. And the laughter that comes from that is like it's intoxicating. It's a really, really wonderful thing where you can kind of, like, to sound like every other like stand-up wanker, put up a mirror to society. And what they're seeing, like what they're hearing is a song that they might like hum along to in the supermarket, but now they're having to actually listen, and it's kind of like it's something that's so familiar, but they're now seeing it in a completely different context, and that makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that makes me happy. Like that makes me really happy. And that kind of nervous laughter is so, so good. Like I rather like nervous laughter than kind of like the kind of like guffawing, kind of even like a slight kind of like that you get at like when you look at a meme on Twitter. Like I would rather that than that, because that means vaguely amusing. That means someone's thinking. Yeah. Like the nervous laughter means that someone's thinking, and that there is a variety of emotions, and the only way that they can deal with it is laughing. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I find it interesting. It's good.
I'm going to go back to Mr. Fogarty's words now. I did say this was a quote heavy episode.
It's all right. I love talking about myself.
Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you? So there's a note about your singing that here we go. Jamie has an incredible and incredibly versatile voice, which veers from husky 1940s balladeer to saccharine sweet popette to throaty devil pervert with consummate ease.
The greatest quote I've ever gotten on my voice. Like that hit the nail on the head. That, like, the day that I got that, the day that review came out, it was my second wedding anniversary. And I was about to go in to go get a Thai massage. And I was just buzzing, knowing that like when I got home and I got on my computer, that was going in every single press kit for every single show I've done. Like, oh, wow, thank you, George. Like, yeah, really hit the nail on the head with that one. Yeah, throaty devil pervert. That's bang on, lad. Like, absolutely bang on, because I know exactly what he's referring to in that show. And I'm like, yeah, it's good. Yes. But yeah, like also just like the husky 1940s balladeer, like just scratches that little like theater kid itch that's in the back of my head. And like especially now that like I'm at the moment I'm listening to a lot of like early like 1950s like rhythm and blues and stuff like that, and I'm like, oh, thank you. Really stroking my ego with that quote. Really, really hardcore. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun playing around with the voice.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're a singer doing other things, playing ukulele, doing comedy, or do you feel like, is it something else?
That's really interesting actually. I'm a singer first and foremost. I trained for 12 years classically. I am extremely lucky and extremely blessed to have had the training that I've had. Basically, my mum realised that I wasn't academic in the slightest, but that I had a bloody pair of pipes on me, and she's like, "Well, let's do that." She's evidently not going to be a doctor, so we'll just put her in the Australian Youth Choir. It'll be fine. She can learn how to sing in Latin. That'll be great. She can definitely make money off of that. Plot twist: I did not. And yeah, so I am a vocalist first and foremost. Like that is where my training is, where like, yeah, I've trained for like almost like half of my life. And it was like the one thing I had that I was really good at and that I knew I was really good at.
Yeah.
And so yeah, all of those years of kind of like busking in the central business district of Perth and things like that. Like it was always like, I am a vocalist. Like, sure, I am accompanying myself on an instrument, but like I'm not a master ukulele player by any means. And I can play about like 3 chords on guitar, which like according to Lou Reed, that's classified as jazz. So I'll take it. But yeah, first and foremost, I'm a vocalist. I'm a singer. But there's something about kind of like something weird that like it's probably just on me and in my head, like it's something weird about being like, I'm a singer. Like it's like, no, you're not just that. You're a particular kind of singer. Like you're a cabaret artist. Like you sing in a particular way, and the stuff that you do surrounding the singing also comes into play. So it's a weird one, because I'm also kind of like, after years of being told that what I do isn't comedy, I'm now feeling extremely confident in calling myself a comic. But like, yeah, it's just a head. Like I've got my fingers in a bunch of like weird little kind of like performance pies where it's just kind of like, oh, cabaret artist. That'll do. Nice little umbrella term. It's like, she's a storyteller. She's a comedian. Like, blah. Weird. It all feels very kind of like wanky to kind of like unpack it like that. And so I just kind of like, oh yeah, like I'm a comedy cabaret artist. That's what I do. Like I sing, I play instruments, I tell stories, I make people laugh. Sometimes I get my tits out and you can throw ping pong balls at them. Who knows? Cabaret artist covers all of that. Thank God. So I don't have to go into that specific detail.
Yeah. So I'm a huge comedy fan. This is a comedy podcast. I've seen many hundreds of performers.
Amazing.
And I've seen all kinds of comedy: stand-up, improv, sketch comedy, musical comedy. I have no other gods before it. Comedy is my jam. Your show was incredibly funny. I mean, it's way up there for me with the shows that I've seen. So, but more than that, I mean, it opened up I'm aware of cabaret. I've seen some cabaret shows. I'm aware of Marcel Leconte, you mentioned earlier, his Cabaret Fantastique. But for me, it was all a little bit, whatever I've seen has always been a little bit too exuberant for my delicate sensibilities. It's very flamboyant, and I'm sort of going, okay, all right, bring it down. But what you were doing was not only hilariously funny, but it was the music, the singing particularly, which was fantastic singing, and the choices that you made and the power behind the message, I thought was phenomenal. I was really impressed by it. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if I was to talk to someone about comedy and they say, well, what sort of comedy, are you into? I would now put cabaret under that umbrella very firmly, though.
That makes me so happy. Yeah. Oh my God. Thank you so much. Number one. Oh my God. My little heart. I think like I totally understand what you mean with a lot of kind of cabaret being like quite exuberant and quite kind of like flamboyant and things like that.
Yeah.
I totally understand that, and I absolutely kind of like totally get where you're coming from, because I have a similar thing. I've watched a lot of cabaret. I've watched like from like very much kind of like champagne cabaret to like someone performing songs in like the back room of a 24-hour diner. Like, so very different ends of the spectrum, but still the same genre. I think potentially what might be the thing about mine is that it is still really grounded. I don't have like a huge budget. I'm still like very much kind of like self-producing on a shoestring and things like that. I'm not here to present glitters and sequins and kind of spectacle. I love spectacle though. Like I love going to see spectacle. And there's like a few acts that like kind of combine the very much kind of like grounded kind of thing with the kind of glitter and sequins. And one that definitely comes to mind, who I adore to the ends of the earth and will forever be an absolute awe of, is Reuben Kaye, who is this like 7-foot, still wearing like a beautiful high Cuban heel, gender mess that is like a terrifying like nightmare timeline Elton John with like just a taste for blood. Like you watch him and you don't know whether he's going to fight you or fuck you. And it is a joy every time. And like, yeah, he's currently up in Edinburgh, absolutely smashing it. And he's an Australian lad as well. He's from Melbourne, I believe. And like, yeah, there is definitely that kind of like very much punk sensibilities combined with like higher budget and just a bananas, like everyone loves a man in a false lash up in Edinburgh. They go crazy for that shit, and they eat it up. They're like, hell yeah, this person is terrifying and they're wearing massive lashes, beautiful, we'll take it. They'll present the press night, it'll be fantastic. And yeah, it's very much kind of like that really solid combination of that kind of like lo-fi kind of independent, punk sensibilities and things like that.
Yeah.
Like Tom has the same thing as well. There is kind of like a lot of like what Tom and I do, not so much Reuben, but what Tom and I do is considered like, and it feels wanky every time, cabaret. Like, because we're not in fancy bullshit costumes with a bajillion expensive rhinestones and Swarovski crystals all over us singing Liza Minnelli covers. And that's okay. Like, I love that shit. Don't get me wrong, but it's not for me. Like, you wouldn't catch me dead performing in a corset. Like, no way. And it's kind of like this like slightly unpolished kind of thing in comparison to like there's some amazing artists in Perth who are doing like very much like heading towards like the champagne cabaret, definitely catering their stuff to variety lineups like La Clique and things like that. Like you've got CC Desist, who is like a Vegas showgirl singing like Liza covers and things like that. And she is beautiful and stunning and so talented. And then like on the flip side of that, there's like me, who's in a shabby vintage dress playing ukulele. I don't have a full band with me, but I wouldn't have it any other way. So I think alt cabaret might be your cup of tea, maybe. Like, yeah. I reckon that might be kind of like the little rabbit hole that you might need to go down if you're digging cabaret.
It's always another rabbit hole to go down.
Always, always. Little subgenres everywhere, tiny, tiny little niches that'll find yourself watching like 2010 like video clips of Joey Black singing a sick love song.
The show, because of pandemics and what have you, the show's been a while in the making. Is it the show today that it was when you started writing it?
So I was really lucky. So I performed this show in 2019. So the show has been performed for a while now, and during the pandemic I did online versions of it, which was really odd.
Yeah.
But I did it as a part of a thing called Normal Place, which is a streaming platform based in Perth. That's kind of like a like Netflix for weirdos kind of thing, like specifically for kind of like fringe artists. So you've got like people like Cameron Moore doing their shows. You've got Tom doing his shows. You've got me doing my show. You've got like Joni Boyd and Saoirse, who are spoken word artists from Perth. Doing their shows and things like that. And it ends up being a lot more kind of like multimedia-y. And we had a chat function, and like throughout the show, I would like check in on the chat, like and see kind of like the commentary of people like talking about the show as it's going on.
Yeah.
Which was like really, really cool. And I think definitely kind of like set a good path for being able to perform this show to kind of like maybe more quieter, kind of like more contemplative audiences, which I've had people who just want to kind of like sit and listen politely and think about what is being presented to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not the show that it was when I first did it, because it was a very kind of like angry, emotionally volatile show. Sure. And now it's definitely kind of like a place of joy and fun for me.
Yeah.
That it's kind of like this safe space where I can play with teetering on the edges of like what's appropriate and what's not. Yeah. Especially in regards to kind of like interacting with the audience members and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely taken a turn from being like a very angry, very negative show to being kind of like a celebration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts. You've got the music, you've got singing and playing, you've got comedy in there, you've got a story, a message as well. How do you keep all those plates spinning at once? What do you prioritize?
So with this show, the way that I kind of like did it was like I had my core idea, which was kind of like processing this weird situation that I was in processing an event. And then I needed something like, I didn't want to kind of like make the show specifically about that. Yeah. And so I expanded that kind of like spider map style. I expanded that to, power imbalances in the arts. And then you need to find kind of like a thing to wrap it up with. Like, what is the kind of like shtick that's going to be in kind of like the, like in the advertising and things like that. And I was like, groupie culture. Right. That's a really interesting one, because like I went to a lot of shows while I was underage. I followed bands around. Like I have been basically a modern day groupie before. Like that's a really interesting, and that kind of like brought in where to go from there. So I put a set list together. There was like 22 songs that could have gone in this show that are all like massive hits. Yeah. And I had to kind of like create a story. And the way that I created the story is like the girl's getting younger and younger as the show goes on. Yeah. And it kind of like starts at this kind of very fun kind of like start and kind of ends in this kind of like uncomfortable pit. And I just needed to kind of like fill in the space between that. So at least for this show, because it's a jukebox cabaret.
Yeah.
Like the music came first, and then I kind of like worked my way down.
Yeah.
And filled in the space in between. And that's how that show worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For all the darkness at its heart, it's a very funny show. It's very funny.
Yeah, it's very funny. It's a fun show to perform as well. Like I love performing the show so much, and I love the varied reactions that I've had. Like I've had people like talk to me after the show being like, that was like the funniest thing. Oh my God. Like talking about specifically the comedy. You have people who come through who are like, your voice, like you're playing, like I really enjoyed the music aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got like women in their 60s in tears after the show who like just hug me and just lose it. And like I was at my season at the State Theatre Centre of Western Australia in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I had this lady basically like sit me down after the show. She bought me a drink, and she's like, a whole bunch of stuff got said in that show that I've never had the balls to kind of talk about in regards to myself. And like, this was a lady who was like tearing up in a very big way and had been crying like towards the end of the show.
Yeah.
And she's like, you are providing a voice to a generation of now women who were once girls who experienced things not far from what you're talking about in this show. And like that was really full on for me. I was like, whoa, oh boy, this is a lot. And then you'll have someone being like, yeah, those nonce jokes are hilarious, eh? Like as the next person, and I'm like, wow, this is
that's pendulum swing. So.
yeah. And then like some like old fella being like, yeah, I'm still gonna listen to the Beatles though. And I'm like, sick, so am I, dude. Like, right on. You're just never gonna be able to listen to Rubber Soul all the way through without thinking of me. Like, enjoy that. Or like my dad, he came to my show, and afterwards he's just like, that was a really important show, sweetheart. I'm very proud of you, and you know that I love you. However, Stray Cat Blues used to be my favorite Rolling Stones song. And I'm like, well, that's for you to unpack, Dad.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So it would be remiss of me not to be talking to a young woman on the comedy / cabaret circuit and not mention gender politics. So
it's exhausting, isn't it?
Well, I'm very much on the outside, but yes, it feels exhausting from my perspective.
One thing that I will say about kind of gender politics, and like I just want to briefly acknowledge Matthew Trudorn, who single-handedly put together Oxford Comedy Festival, which I was lucky enough to perform in.
Yeah.
Holy hell, that is what a comedy festival should look like. Like, that is what a comedy festival should look like. Like, it was baffling to me. So living in Perth, and like occasionally touring around Australia, I hadn't seen a festival that looked like that, where there was like practically like equal representation when it came to like gender and like diversity and representation of underrepresented voices in comedy and things like that. Yeah. There was practically none of that in specifically in Perth. And I will dunk on Perth a little bit for this, because like I grew up there, and you know, I cut my teeth there, and I know. And it was amazing, like scrolling through that website and looking at the names. It was such a delight to be a part of a lineup like that. And I was like, wow, like this is what we can do. This is exactly what we can do. Yep. The voices are there. It's just, they need to be amplified. like it was genuinely groundbreaking. And I forwarded the lineup for Oxford Comedy Festival to a handful of bookers in WA, and I'm like, fellas, step your colloquial pussy up, like with all due respect, like this is what festivals should look like. If you're whinging about kind of like, there are no women in comedy, there are no female comedians that I can book, it's like, okay, you're not asking the bigger question here, babes. You're not asking the question as to why. Like, I have a handful of friends who have stepped away from comedy purely for the sake of like their own goddamn mental health. And I'm like, you're not focusing on the bigger picture here, guys. You've got a small town attitude. And if Oxford, which is like, in comparison to like the UK, it's got big small town vibes. Like, it reminds me a lot of like Adelaide. If Oxford can put a lineup like that together, what fucking excuse does Australia have? Absolutely none. Do your research. Look harder. Look harder. Because the art is there. It's just not being like sought out, and it's not being given the same opportunities that other art might get. Like, baffling stuff. Sorry, that's my rant about Perth.
Go for it. I mean, I was going to ask how you feel approaches to women or to diversity in general, or you know, non-binary or whatever you want to call the broadness of humanity. If the approaches have been different over time, but I think it sounds like it's different over continents.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Like, I have been lucky, and maybe it's because I'm just going to the right comedy rooms and hanging out with the right people. I have not seen one like edgy cunt at an open mic yet, when you would get at least 3 every night in Perth. And I'm like, wow, this is wild. It just shows kind of like just the differences between the scene and things like that, and how kind of like very much bigoted content just kind of gets shut down here. It's a treat. It's a fucking treat, I'll tell you that much. Like, it's delightful. Like, the fact that I can go to an open mic night and just not be exhausted by like the absolute audacity and fuckery of like an open micer for 5 minutes. I'm like, oh wow, I've left an open mic night feeling good. Amazing.
I love that. Jamie, how can we find out about you, what you're doing, where you're going to be playing?
I'm mostly active on the socials, so you can find me at Jamie Mykaela on basically everything. So facebook.com/Jamie Mykaela, Instagram, I'm just at Jamie Mykaela, and Twitter, I am at Jamie Mykaela.
I'll put links to those in the show notes as well. Let's conclude our interview today with Jamie. Can you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I base my entire podcast around
it. That's such a good question. Comedy in a nutshell, at least for me, is something that can simultaneously provide me with serotonin from laughing and feeling good, but also potentially have another side to that of like education. But even then, like, it doesn't have to. I think it's something that just provides me serotonin and amusement, because like, you can have a show like mine, which is funny and educational, but you can also have a show like Gary Starr Saves Theatre, which is just pure silliness and joy. So I think comedy is simultaneous with joy for me. Yeah.
Beautiful. Jamie, thank you so much for being with me today. It's been an absolute delight. I've loved talking with you.
Thank you. This has been so delightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll see you around the traps.
You will.
I'll catch you later.